Hello there, and welcome to Laurence Plays Factorio Space Age, and to the rather weird and gross planet of Gleba. So this is my fourth planet, if we include Norvis as the first one, because I've been off to Flora, the lightning planet, then to Vulcanus, the volcanic and lava-y planet, and now Gleeber, the weird, swampy, organic, biological nonsense planet. And there are some interesting features here. The whole planet is rather swampy, as you can see by the fact that I'm having to fly around a bit and it's going squish, squish, squish as I run around. And there are various interesting dangers, like these things, these boom puffs, where if you demolish one of these trees, it explodes and damages everything around it. And they're a bit weird, because they do explode and they do some damage, but it's an insignificant amount of damage. It's just sort of, it's enough damage to be annoying, rather than enough damage to actually damage anything. Even if you have a whole cluster of them like this, you can beat them up a little bit, and yeah, you get some damage. It's enough to damage a Teflili, apparently, or Teflili. But it's not really enough damage to do anything significant to any of your machinery or yourself when you're around it. Now, granted, that's partly because I've upgraded to the mech suit, which is why I'm able to fly over things. That's very, very useful. Maybe we'll talk a little bit more about that later, but not for the time being. Anyway, so yes, this is an organic and swampy planet. So there's loads of water, which makes building difficult unless you have lots and lots of landfill. And there's very little stone on this planet, so making the landfill is also a challenge. And additionally, this is one of the planets with extra enemies, or new enemy types. So if we sort of wander over this way a little bit, we can see, yeah, we've got these guys. These are strafers, as you can see in the hint over on the right hand side, and they do a sort of they have a weird attack style where if I get in close to them, then they try and run in circles around me while they launch these sort of little missile things. Fortunately, I have lots and lots of speed, so I can sort of stay away from them. But they don't come charging in like a biter, so they're sort of a little bit less dangerous. But their missiles will eventually turn into what are called wrigglers, and that's these little guys on the floor, and they are basically just like biters but smaller and slightly less dangerous. So they'll run towards you and try and nibble on you. In the meantime, everything else will just carry on. The strafers will keep on shooting at you. It can be fairly dangerous early on, but at the moment, as you can tell by the way this is going, I've managed to upgrade my gear enough that they're not too much of a worry. If I switch over to a machine gun, I can absolutely rip through them like that. Okay, this is granted because I'm using green ammunition, so it's absolutely lethal. And the rocket launcher is wonderfully effective against the larger guys. But whenever you kill anything on this planet, it turns into more wrigglers, and so you then have loads of these guys to worry about. Now, an interesting feature that I hadn't read about, but was told about by people in chat, is if you leave these guys alone for long enough, any wriggler that's created by something getting sort of shot or that isn't spawned naturally, shall we say, will gradually take damage over time until eventually they all just pop, just like that. And so they're not actually all that dangerous, because you can tend to just run away and eventually they'll take care of themselves. The bigger guys can be quite a lot more dangerous though, especially their bigger cousins, who we'll maybe see at some point later in the video. We'll see how it goes. But they spawn in from these things, egg rafts, and like everything else on Gleba, when you shoot it and destroy it, it turns into an enormous quantity of wrigglers and they come charging towards you. But you do have to destroy a certain number of these egg rafts, because when you destroy them, you get some spoils out of them, and you get these things. You get the pentapod eggs, and these are fun. So you can take those, and then they can be taken away and made into the biochambers. And biochambers are a new type of construction building which require feeding. So this one needs some pizza at the moment. And then with these, you can do all kinds of weird biological recipes like breeding fish and other stuff as well. We'll get onto that in a bit more detail later on. Finally, while we're talking about these sort of hazards, it would be remiss of me not to mention the third type of enemy you can find on this planet, and that's the friendly neighbourhood stomper. And these guys they're probably the most dangerous of the enemies so far, because they're very, very tough, and they just come in and anything they step on takes an enormous amount of damage, as you'd kind of expect from the sheer size of them. And so they're not a serious problem at the stage I've got to, in that I can take them out relatively easily with the rocket launcher. However, they're very, very difficult to deal with if you're not mobile, because they'll just come in and stomp on you, and that means that the defences struggle against them, and if they get into your base, then you're in a huge amount of trouble, as you can see here. Yeah, this didn't go so well for me. I will admit I ended up actually save scumming after this, because it was so destructive that it was going to be virtually impossible to come back from. I'm not entirely proud of that, but things did not go well. But here you can see all the various natives of the planet. You've got big stompy guys, little wriggly guys, the medium wriggly guys, and then you've got the strafers who wander around and then try and run in circles around you. And I think that they're very interesting. It gives you it makes combat rather different to the biters and spitters that we used to from Norvis, but they're also horrifying and horrendous too. I have to try and deal with. Much like biters, as the pollution increases and the distance from the centre increases and so on, you tend to get larger and more tightly packed nests of them. So the enemies tend to come in larger and larger quantities. But as again, they're not too difficult to deal with. I can hit this guy with some rockets and he'll go down pretty quickly. And then there's just a million and one little wriggly guys trying to chase me because I'm coming in and destroying all of their stuff. But you know, that's what enemies are for in this game, right? You just go and blow everything up, and then you have to deal with the consequences afterwards, which is always fun. With this being a biological planet, resource collection is done largely through growing and harvesting trees. And so we've got these, well, there are trees out here growing. This is a Yamako tree, which is some sort of red fruit, and we've got another one which grows purple fruit, which look a little bit like brains and turn into some sort of apple jelly. And so, yeah, we can use we can grow these trees, and then we use these agricultural towers to harvest them. As you can see here, we've got various different highlights. The green areas are the areas where I've got trees actually growing at the moment, and the white squares show how grown the trees are. So this one down here is only 12% grown, whereas these ones up here are virtually finished, 88%. They're gradually growing, and when they get to fully grown, the harvesting tower, the agricultural tower, will automatically harvest them. The fruit will come out down the belt here, and then it'll plant a new one to replace it. So the resources are quite literally infinite on this planet. They will continue to grow and grow because they are plants. There we go, like this, so we can harvest some more of them and plant another one. You don't need to go out and find new patches, although if you increase the rate you need them at, you may find that you need to create more area to grow them in. And if we look on the map, you can see various different colours of terrain around here. The yellow stuff, I think, is suitable for growing Yamako, and the purple stuff is suitable for growing the other ones, the what are these even called? The jelly stems. And as you can see by the very square edges here, there is a special type of landfill you can put down in these areas to make the available growing area a little bit bigger, and that allows you to turn, I believe, yellow areas into green areas. Red areas I think you can't use, possibly because there's the wrong type of soil there or something like that. I'm not 100% sure of the rules over here, but I have been able to get a decent amount of jelly fruit out and Yamako out as well. So yes, the resources are infinite. However, if we turn on the pollution view, harvesting or growing, I think it's harvesting the trees is the step that actually produces this pollution cloud. And it's described as spores rather than pollution, because the Glebian natives don't actually care about any pollution that's released from your factory. You can burn as much stuff as you want, but when you harvest the trees, it releases spore clouds, and that causes something vaguely similar. It attracts the aliens, they come over to have a look, and then they'll probably come in and step on everything. But this is a little bit different to pollution on Norvis, because rather than pathing towards probably your power plant or wherever the most of the pollution is generated, they'll path towards your plantations, which I suppose is equivalent to pathing towards your mining areas, and they'll try and stomp those instead. So in hindsight, the best way to set this up would be to have a central factory in one place, and then have your plantations a decent distance away, and bring in the resources from the plantations to the main factory by train, thereby keeping the area that is going to attract the unwanted attention a decent distance away from the stuff you actually care about. And also, looking at this map, in hindsight, there's a really good area down here for building in, which I didn't use, and there's another reasonably good area for building in up here, which I didn't use. I ended up starting here instead, which is a bit small and pokey. So that was a bit of a mistake, and if I was doing this again, I would do things a bit differently. But I'm not yet, even though I have rebuilt the factory here about 3 times now. I've kept it in more or less the same place for sort of because that's where stuff is type reasons. So yes, everything works off this organic stuff. We have the fruit coming in here. This is the jelly mash, and this is the Yamako coming along here. And then we've got machines that are processing it down into a more usable format of it, and then it's carrying on and being processed through the system. So we've got some machines here that's turning it into bioflux. We've got some machines that are turning bioflux into nutrients, because as I said earlier, all of your biochambers require nutrients in order to run properly, and otherwise they get hungry and nothing works properly. And then these things get passed on down here, where we can turn them into eggs and science packs, and the science packs can be fed off to a rocket and launched away into space. So this all works really quite nicely. And then there's some additional recipes down here where you can effectively turn the fruit into copper and iron by growing special types of bacteria. And then over here I've got the normal sort of bus system where you bring in iron and copper and steel and so on, and then you make all of the things that you need for your factory. And all of this is great. It's sort of working quite well, but there is one big elephant in the room on this planet that I have not touched on yet, and that is spoilage. All of the organic stuff you grow on Gleeber, so whether it's the nutrients, the bioflux, the fruit, all kinds of things like that, all have spoilage meters. So you can see on all of these fruit things on here, there are white bars underneath them, and that is how much time it has left before it goes off. And when something goes off, it will turn into spoilage, which is basically just it's rotten fruit essentially, and that can be burned to get rid of it. But essentially, it means you've got a time limit on absolutely everything. So this is why I've got these belts constantly flowing, trying to pass the Yamako mash and the jelly goop through and the bioflux through the system and keep it running. Because if you make something out of partially spoiled fruit, like for example here, if we use partially spoiled bioflux to make these science packs, then we get partially spoiled science packs coming out on the other side. You can see we've got this has only got an 85% freshness, which means after 51 minutes it'll turn into goop, turn into spoilage. And so you want to keep things as fresh as possible. So I've got everything flowing through here, and it's not an amazing design. I would do things slightly differently now if I rebuilt it again, but it's kind of working. But the thing is, as I say, everything goes off and eventually turns into spoilage. So that means you need to have because these machines, for example, they take in a load of nutrients. Sometimes these nutrients will go off if you don't use them, if the machines aren't running enough. So you need to have another inserter that will take out spoilage and put it on some sort of disposal belt. All of your belts, wherever they end, need to have a system to get rid of any spoilage that ends up on them. So round here, for example, we're feeding the bioflux in along here to go into this rocket, but it might spoil on the way round. So we've got an inserter here on the end that will put it into this heating tower to burn it off and get rid of it. We've got the rocket silo here that takes away, well actually it should take away, I need to turn off automatic requests, there we go. It will load up with bioflux that comes in along the belt here. We can load 1,000 of it in there, it can take up space to be taken away. But if it sits in here for too long, we've got an hour left on this stuff, so that's quite a long time. But if it sits in here for too long, it'll eventually go off and we need to take the spoilage out and put it into the heating tower. So there's lots and lots of things here to worry about on various different levels that you need to make sure that everything is capable of getting rid of spoilage. But spoilage is also kind of useful. Over here we're burning the spoilage and turning it into carbon. Over here we're turning it into sulfur. So you can turn spoilage into useful other products as well, and including carbon fibre, which is the special ingredient from this planet. And so that means you need to keep a supply of spoilage over here. We're also burning spoilage in massive quantities down here, and that's powering the base. So all the fruit is going off, which we're putting it into these burner towers, and they're at about 1,000 degrees because there's so much flowing in. And that's going in, and that's allowing us to boil water, goes into these turbines, and that's powering my entire factory over here. So the spoilage is useful, but also having things go off is a problem. It means you can't do the standard sort of thing you would do with most Factorio ingredients. So for example here, I've got, this is normal Factorio, we've got iron ore coming down here and there's no spoilage on this. So I've just put it onto a belt, and then the furnaces will grab from the belt, cook it into iron plates and pass it out along here whenever I need some iron. Great, nice and simple. But you can't do that with anything organic that's going to go off, because if you have a belt like this, all of this would have turned into spoilage by now if this was something that did spoil, like the green jelly. And then the belt would be clogged up with gunk that we can't use, and these machines wouldn't work because they don't want the spoilage. Which is why I've just got this entire belt through the system through the middle of my factory, just running constantly all the time, attempting to take all of the resources away and then burn them to get rid of them, and just take off what is required as it comes through. So I know that whatever is being passed through is always going to be at least reasonably fresh. And yes, it kind of works. But the problem with this is it's enormously wasteful. There is always lots and lots of fruit flowing in here, being used up, and then just being burned down here, and we don't even need this much for power. And that means because we're constantly getting through fruit, we're constantly creating more and more spores, and that means we get more and more attention from the pentapods, the unfriendly guys on this planet with 5 legs, hence the name. And so it causes a bit of a feedback loop where, okay, the resources are free, but they do also trigger a lot of attention from the enemy, and that can cause problems when they come in and decide they want to step on your factory. So yeah, it's a dilemma, and also it creates an enormous design headache. Headache is probably the right word. You need to think quite carefully about how you're going to set everything up and make sure you're producing enough, but not too much, of all of the resources required. The other thing is, not everything decays into spoilage. So over here we have quite a useful one. So we are breeding iron bacteria, the iron bacteria cultivation. So as we produce this bacteria, eventually after a not very long, the iron bacteria will decay into iron ore, and that means we can then turn them into iron. So that's actually really, really useful. On a slightly less useful side, we have the pentapod eggs that we're growing up here that we need in order to make the agricultural science packs that we're shipping away from here. When they decay, they spoil into a pentapod, so the egg actually hatches rather than going off, as it were. So it doesn't turn to spoilage, it turns into a pentapod, and that's why there's all these lightning turrets around this area, because every so often, if the system runs a bit slowly, or down here, we've got some pentapod eggs in here, they've got 12 minutes, 13 minutes left on them. If we don't turn them into science packs, they will turn into pentapods, and then we'll have some running around right in the middle of the base to chew on things. So there are some lightning turrets around here to zap them as quickly as possible, and a couple of bullet turrets as well, which I put in first. So yeah, there's a lot to think about here, but Gleba does mean free resources, because the factory will just keep running as long as you can keep it safe. And so you can produce large amounts of, well, rocket fuel is particularly easy. I've been told plastic is very, very easy as well, although I've only got a very, very small machine down here making it. This one has failed, probably because it's filled up with, yes, there we go, it's filled up with spoilage, so it can't pull in any more food. But we're not using any plastic at the moment, so that's not a problem. Oh, we're actually using a bit of plastic. So you see, this machine up here is dumping out plastic and spoilage, and then I'm having to filter that out down here, just to make sure everything goes into the right places. It's all a bit of a process. But I have managed to get it going with multiple rebuilds of pretty much the entire base. I think this is the Mark III, and it still has some problems. It's just got big enough and complicated enough that I don't really want to rip it all up and start again. You may have noticed, looking at it, that it is full of some absolutely horrendous spaghetti. And that comes from that Factorio ignorance level, I think, which is why the beginner players always produce the best spaghetti. And whilst I'm not a Factorio beginner, I was, a few weeks ago, I was a Gleeber beginner. And that means you go in and you put in a build that does what you think you're going to want it to do. So I started off, I was making some fruit stuff, and then I was making the iron and copper bacteria from it, and I had a supply of iron and copper. And then I realised I needed to do other stuff, like I needed to make science packs, so that required a significant rebuild, or at least that required some spaghetti and then a bit of a rebuild to try and make it work a bit better. Then I realised it was all absolutely horrifying, so I rebuilt it again with this constant flow system going on, which is working fairly nicely, except I didn't really leave enough room up here for expansion of how many fruit crushers I've got, how much nutritional stuff I'm making, how many eggs I'm making. It's okay, but I haven't got any room for expansion if I change my mind. And then I realised after I built all of this, and I'd squeezed in the iron and copper production and all metallurgy down here, then I realised that I was going to need to do all of this spoilage processing in order to get explosives out. And so that had to get squeezed onto the side over here, and that's led to a load of weird spaghetti trying to pull everything through in the right order and the right direction. It's all a bit of a mess, as you can see. So it's been an interesting learning experience, and I don't want you to think I'm complaining about this, because I honestly, I definitely don't mean to complain. I actually see this all as quite an interesting thing, as it's giving me the experience of learning about Factorio again in a way that's completely different. If you go in and play a mod pack like Space Exploration or Angel Bobs, it's still, yes, the recipes are different, there's new stuff to learn, but it's still basically Factorio. You put in ingredients, you get other things out. There are new recipes, yes, but they all follow the same basic idea as just Factorio does. However, something like this is quite a lot more, is more different, should we say. And so there's a lot more going on, a lot more new things to play with, and a lot more new things to learn about. And that makes it very interesting, and I am very much enjoying it, at least when my base isn't getting stomped on. On the way through, I should probably address the elephant in the room, which is the pronunciation of this planet's name. Now, I've been saying Gleeba the whole way through because I'm English, and the way it's spelled would be pronounced Gleeba in English. The developers of the game are Czech, and I believe they would pronounce it Gleba because Czech pronunciation rules are different. As I say, I'm English, so I'm going to stick with the English one, especially as Gleba is actually a real word in English. It means one of the sort of the inner frilly bits of a mushroom or something like that, I think. It's very appropriate for the planet we're on, and that word is in fact pronounced Gleba, as Jennifer Aniston will now demonstrate.
Said Gleba!
So I'm going to stick with pronouncing it Gleba. I was trying to alternate at one point during the streams between pronouncing it Gleeber and pronouncing it Gleba, but I have had enough of that now. I'm going to start being slightly less silly. I showed you earlier a little bit of footage about me getting absolutely gleebed or possibly glebbed. I don't know. I'm not sure how I'm pronouncing that one. And that was when the stompers got into my base and just absolutely wrecked everything. And that was because I'd made the classic Factorio blunder of starting to build and then expanding and expanding without thinking about defences. A few enemies came over to say hi, but I was able to deal with them easily, so I did, and then I just carried on building. And then it got to the point where suddenly an attack came in that I was not remotely ready to deal with. I learned my lesson though, and so now I have a system over here where we're making the carbon fibre down here, and we've got plenty of it. There's 3,000 of it. We're making explosives over here to make rockets, and we've got 1.7 thousand of them. This has stopped for some reason because the iron supply has dried up, which is a concern. Why are we not making any iron? Because I've broken a belt. Oh, that's well done there. Good job there, Laurence. How is this supposed to fit in? I think that goes like that. So yes, the iron ends up on this side of the belt. There we go. So now we can make rockets again. That's nice. Anyway, so we're then taking the carbon fibre over here by bot, which is as you'll all know, is not the way I like to do things. But I built up such horrible spaghetti that there was no realistic way to get the carbon fibre over here. I'm not making blue circuits on planet. They're all being brought in from another planet. And that means I'm now making rocket turrets, and therefore I'm now able to sort of defend my factory a little bit. And I've decided the way to defend is to use the rocket turrets. You saw earlier when I was shooting some pentapods myself how effective the rockets are against them. So I've got an entire wall of them going round most of my factory, and before I leave the planet I'll probably finish off that bit across there with some more landfill. And so, I'm defending the factory quite nicely. So I've got these ones, and they're all set up to prioritise, in fact, to only target the strafers and the stompers, the big guys, basically. And then any of the little ones, the wrigglers, those are being taken out by the Tesla turrets, which don't use ammunition, they just use electricity, so they're much cheaper. And the little guys are much easier to take out because they are smaller and have a lot less health. So the theory is that the rocket turrets will take out the big guys, the strafers and the stompers, and then as the wrigglers come in a bit closer, then my lightning turrets will take them out. The lightning turrets have to be imported from Flora though, so I don't want to use them I don't want to put them on the front line, because if they get stomped, well, I've only got a limited number of them. And this system does seem to be working reasonably well now that I've got enough landfill to build it out properly. I've had a couple of issues where we've had some enemies come in and they've managed to at least damage the rocket turrets, maybe to destroy one or two, but mostly it's been going pretty well. And being able to set target priorities is kind of fun and interesting. And I'll talk a bit more about that in the next video because I've used it quite extensively in somewhere else that I'm going to be showing you then. And so, I think that brings us to the end of everything I have to say about Gleeber, at least for the time being. Here you can see my enormous mass of spaghetti, but it's working. It's kind of awful, and I would now build things differently if I was redoing it, and I may well do that at some point later in the series. But for now, it's working, it's ticking over, it only breaks every so often. So I mean, it's definitely not perfect, but it's kind of working, and I'm sort of okay with it. So, in the next video, I'm going to have a bit of a look at how my spaceship designs have developed during the series, and then we'll maybe start looking into going off to Aquilo. So, I hope you've enjoyed this. If you have, please subscribe so you don't miss out on the next video. There's also some DIY videos coming out every other week as well at the moment, as long as I can keep making them. And I've had some fun projects going on recently, so there's some good stuff to see there. I'm also streaming my attempts at space exploration every Monday and Wednesday from 7:30 PM UK time. So please come along to those streams if you'd like to see me actually playing this live and probably getting Gleb once again, and also then heading off to Aquilo to freeze my bits off. So right, I shall see you then. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you've enjoyed the video. Bye bye.